This is Hamel. I'm going to introduce this session. So today we're going to be talking about this paper, Operationalizing Machine Learning in Interview Study, which was written by Shreya Shankar and her colleagues at UC Berkeley. And we also have today Josh Wills, who's a really experienced data scientist, currently at Weavegrid, working as a software engineer. Just to kind of set the stage a bit, around what we're talking about. So why this paper is really interesting is, there's hundreds of surveys done about machine learning all the time. If you look at LinkedIn, kind of inundated with it. A lot of these surveys are not really that interesting, honestly. But this survey hit really hard. And the reason it did is because it kind of boldly states a lot of things that people are too afraid to talk about. And it's written very well. It weaves together like anecdotes with data. And it just really communicates everything very nicely. And I think a lot of data professionals kind of nodded their head in agreement when they read this. But before we get it kicked off, I kind of want to let y'all introduce yourself because I just had a really short introduction. And then I think we also just want to talk a little bit about how the paper was written before we get into questions. So I'll let you go. Shreya, you want to go first?
Please.
Sure. I'm Shreya. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to talk to both of you. I am a PhD student at UC Berkeley in databases and interested kind of in machine learning, kind of how do we apply data management principles to build better, sustainable, reliable machine learning systems.
And I am Josh Wills. I'm a software engineer at Weavegrid. I think as Hamel pointed out, I am sort of a data scientist that made a long series of really bad life choices. And it went from data science down to data engineering, and then kind of just kept on going down. Like my descent into software engineering has not stopped. Maybe at some point I will be designing hardware for all I know, that kind of stuff. But I love this paper as well, and I'm super excited to be here to talk to Shreya about it. Hamel, why don't you kick us off with some questions? You did. Your question's great.
Yeah. So I'm going to get right into the middle of the paper.
Awesome.
With kind of some of the most burning questions I have are observations. So one of the things that you kind of point out in the paper, Shreya, is this importance of having a sandbox and this mismatch between development and production environments, and then how people are struggling creating a similar development environment in production environments, and there's like tension between this like velocity and like validating things. So when I read this, it really triggered me, because I feel like I'm kind of been gaslighted for so long that hey, we have the cloud, it should be so easy to spin up a development environment. But yet every company I've ever worked at is actually really hard still right now. But I feel like we're all told that it should be easy, and it is easy, but we don't really talk about it. So that I was really excited to see that in the paper. And it seems like a fundamental problem, it's kind of like a brass tacks of doing anything, not even data science, just doing any software related work at all. And so I found it it was kind of also a slap in the face. I feel like, just in some sense, to the industry, so it feels like we're building a lot of tools downstream from this, but we're still struggling on this sandbox. So what did I just see if y'all can respond to that. So, I wonder what y'all think.
I can tell you how the section came about. We were doing these semi-structured interviews. Basically, it's 1 hour long Zoom call, and the questions were not leading in any way. It was tell us about a bug you fixed last week, or there was nothing. We didn't say any buzzwords, no environment, no. We never said Jupyter notebooks. People come to us saying Jupyter notebooks for this reason. And we got we annotated these transcripts with all the different types of bugs that came up. And one of the things for me was and like also Rolando, we had like some 5,000 different annotations, and we were like, oh my God, we cannot sit here through these 5,000 different codes. How do we group them together? Like, look at all these different types of bugs that we have found. Like, is there anything that connects them that we can say to the crowd? And a lot of them happen to be like, oh man, like if they just were using the same environment that they had in production, this bug wouldn't be there. Or they were assuming access to data that they didn't have in production, but they did this during development time. A lot of these types of, once we framed it as that, then it dawned on us that like, oh, we should write about this like mismatch between development and production. And then why is it that there's a mismatch? Goes back to our ML engineering is highly experimental thing that we said, right? Like when you have such an iterative experimental process during development, it's important to like have high velocity so you can throw away bad ideas quickly, right? Like I want to have local GPUs so I can try different ideas. I want to try things locally. I want to use notebooks so I can load my data frame once instead of like repeatedly. All of these small things matter, right? But it's really hard to support that in kind of like a production environment. And I think like that's where the discrepancy happens. In the beginning, you want to like train models, get something, prove some promise to some client. But that's like a fundamentally different mode of working than the production kind of pipelines.
I loved that section of the paper as well, Shreya, and it made me think about in places I have worked where that actually is not true, where we did in fact have that sandbox environment. And I had 3 of them in my experience. The first one was Google. So Google, when I worked on like ad CTR prediction, the system for doing it back in the day was called SmartAss. And SmartAss is a great. It was the Smart Ad Selection System or something like that. It was developed way back in 2004, so it was like a fairly mature piece of technology by the time I got there in 2007. Mm-hmm. And SmartAss was kind of like it was sort of like Valpal Wabbit plus. Hamel, everyone knows my deep affection for Valpal Wabbit, I assume. Like
yes, we do. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so what that meant was SmartAss was in production updating its weights. Like every 15 minutes, it would kind of publish a new model based on what it had learned in the last 15 minutes about like what ads were people were clicking on and stuff. And so there was a whole massive infrastructure for running like offline sandbox style simulations runs of SmartAss models over the exact same data it's on production and so on and so forth. And the other case where I've seen this is in high frequency trading. High frequency trading is another place where, like, again, there's code that is sort of learning online from data it sees, and then being able to back test that and run stuff offline is super, super important. And so they invest a ton of energy in it. And then finally, my favorite by far was Netflix, which ran into this problem as well. And so Netflix, like being Netflix, like actually like connected to production, like when they were training their models to fetch their data. Like it was like the most Netflix kind of like crazy chaos monkey kind of thing I'd ever heard of. And so like I think what is special to me about this is that the reason we're bad at this most of the time is because model training is not something we typically do in production. We do inference in production and we do inference online, but we don't do model training and sort of actual model updating online in production anymore. And so the only time you ever see this kind of sandbox pattern happen is with companies that are doing online model training, where literally the model is learning in production. And so there is like this huge engineering impetus to train stuff online. That to me is like, that's the fundamental difference there. That was my meta level thing. Anyway.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess like it feels like the Googles and the Netflix of the world, they have this like utopia that project outwards onto, whatever, Silicon Valley or even like all of tech.
Indeed.
And things that they like, if they, things that they don't discuss, I feel like maybe sometimes people take for granted, like the sandbox thing, perhaps. I don't know.
Exactly right. There's so much like social stuff they do that is not, it's all technology and tools and not these social organizational structures around it that make the tools like work. Anyway, back to Shreya though. Let's me and you shut up for a bit. Yeah.
No, definitely. I totally agree.
Okay, that's not what we're trying to do in this panel though. We're trying to disagree with each other violently. Okay. So let's talk about notebooks some more then.
Yeah. Let's talk about notebooks. So, okay, I would just like to follow up on that, to like go deeper into that area, to like linger on this a little bit more, this like development environment. So let's like, a very related thing is this like idea of software engineering for machine learning. And like, so this is discussed extensively in the paper. So like the first thing that caught my attention is kind of this section that has like strong opinions on Jupyter notebooks. And it has like anecdotes from people that says, we want to put notebooks in production. And then it contrasts that with other people that says, we don't allow notebooks at all. Even like there's a quote that says like, this is garbage. And maybe I'm misquoting, but someone used that adjective in the literal
quote. This was all garbage.
Yeah. This is all garbage. And so like, in the kind of, Shreya, you summarize that as like, okay, this like kind of this is like a artifact of these like competing priorities. But then also like to compound on that, this like notebook thing. Then like we talk about like code review, and like how people felt like code review is not helpful. And then there's this other quote that I found very interesting, probably my favorite quote of the whole paper, and I'll just read it. It says, "I'm feeling more convinced that software engineering practices," or I'll just read it from the beginning. So I used to see a lot of people complaining that model developers don't follow software engineering practices. At this point, I'm feeling more convinced that they don't follow software engineering practices, not because they're lazy, but because software engineering practices are contradictory to the agility analysis of exploration. So, wow. So like you take that all together, like the sandbox thing, notebooks, like people don't even like, first of all, like they're having a problem setting up a development environment. And then like there's a lot of contention around like what kind of development environment people should use to, like that's encapsulated in this notebook. And also like what their software engineering workflow should look like. Like, should you even use notebooks? Or like, how does code review fit in? And then like, there's this repudiation of the whole software development workflow. And this really resonates with me because I feel like, at least for me, like software developers have kind of shoved software development into my face as a machine learning engineer. And it's like only after a certain amount of time, like maybe in the last 2 years, I've started pushing back to the extent where I'm building tools that kind of reject some of these things. So I just want to like throw that out there and have both of you react.
The number of times I've seen like data science code that's like software engineered, like they shove things in a class because it's software engineering. Oh my God. Like it's not the data, it's just like, why? Like you don't mash. This is another problem I have kind of with the MLOps industry where it's like, oh, we can solve problems if we throw a software engineering principle. Like so a lot of people will talk about, oh, we throw unit testing at machine learning. We solve MLOps. And I'm like, you literally picked two buzzwords and fused them together. That's not a product. But anyways, I don't know. It's like a separate tangent. One thing I wish I could have written about in the paper, I don't know how relevant it is because it's an academic paper submitted to an academic conference, but there is a large cultural context around kind of software engineering, machine learning principles. Like, for example, like in the 2000s, there's like a ethos around moving fast and breaking things. So when you think about this, like screams velocity, like let's iterate fast, let's ship quickly, and then think about the consequences later. And a lot of kind of software engineering, even like data science or just iterating quickly falls under this. But for a lot of ML tasks, you cannot have that kind of ethos. Like autonomous vehicles are a great example of we interviewed some people from AV companies, and they said at the beginning we were having too high velocity and people were maintaining separate forks of evaluation because they wanted to ship to production fast. But the consequence of an on-the-road failure is so high. There's a quote in there that said, like, we'd much rather gate models going to production than put something bad there, right? So I think going back to your like Jupyter notebooks, that tension between velocity and validation, right? It's like a spectrum. People will lie on different places in that spectrum. And it's not just personal philosophy. I think it's also like the broader cultural context. What's the ethos that their organization has? What is the tasks that they're working on? Everything has different consequences. Going into the study, I was always like, why do people have such polarizing opinions? I think now it makes sense why people have polarizing opinions. I don't know if there's any correct opinion based on the diversity of teams and use cases out there.
Shreya, I mean, that doesn't work in a panel. We don't have nuanced opinions here. Now, we make extreme statements. Like, I'm going to say, no, software engineering principles are always right. HAML is completely wrong. Notebooks are bad. You should not use them. No, I kid, but also not. Yeah, anyway. Nuance. What fun is that?
So do we think this like development workflow issue can be solved? Like, I mean, this like polarizing thing is sort of a signal to me that we haven't arrived at the right thing yet. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so polarizing. So do we think that it can be solved?
I think that there will be schools of thought that will have more opinionated like guardrails on notebooks. If you think back, I love to think back about like spreadsheets. Of course, like sadly, I was not alive when spreadsheets first came out, but it's like spreadsheets, there's like a camp of people who will use spreadsheets for everything. They will put mistakes in their spreadsheets. It is okay to have mistakes. It is okay to present crappy results to their boss, and they'll get promoted for it. And like, that is just that's the nature of life in certain industries. They will make spreadsheets to manage spreadsheets. It's amazing the like level of spreadsheet confusion going on. I have a feeling that it's probably going to be the same in some ways when it comes like any data management tool is kind of like this, right? If there's like some camp of people that are like going to use them no matter what, and the consequence of a failure is actually not that drastic, because at the end of the day, the organization is all about like the people. What do the people want? What is the gut instinct of the leader? If they want to change the metric, they could change the metric. At some big organizations we interviewed for this paper, they will say things like, "Oh, our top line metric changes every quarter," and it's like, you know that like click through rate and like number of seconds I spend watching piece of media, two completely different metrics, but like they will switch from one to another in the span of a week. So I don't know. It doesn't feel like something that I would personally do if I were running a team, but I think it's out there and there's enough people that are like this. I don't know, it makes the space of data management really interesting, I think.
So sorry, you wouldn't personally do what if you're running a team?
Oh, I don't think I would personally like, I would want to have a lot of guardrails on the data management tools and make the kind of product decisions less like instinct driven and more, when you get to a certain point, but in the beginning, you probably need to have more instinct driven product decisions. But when you're like running a Google sized company, not that I'm ever wanting to run a Google sized company, but when you're running something like that, you need to like make really justified decisions, right? And like a spreadsheet that you can't trust, like a Jupyter notebook that you can't trust, right? It's not going to cut it for me.
If I may make an analogy, I guess my takeaway from this really, and I thought was most useful about the doc is really broadly that like software engineers do not understand the exploration model building workflow. They really just like deeply, profoundly don't get it, right? And I think like when you ask a software engineer to look at the model development workflow, what comes out is auto ML.
Yeah, thank you.
Right? I mean, I'm kind of serious. Like, it's like, well, this is a bunch of like it looked like it's kind of like SRE, right? SRE emerged when software engineers looked at like what the sysadmins were doing and said, okay, we're going to automate all this stuff with software. And that's kind of how I feel about AutoML right now. AutoML is like, let's go automate all of this exploratory stuff and just brute force the hell out of it and compute. Like, and that's kind of what we get. And that, I mean, I think, you know, mixed opinions on AutoML here. Hamel, how do you feel at AutoML as a neutral observer? What do you think?
I'm not that neutral on AutoML. Yeah, I mean, AutoML, yeah, I mean, I really like AutoML. I think it augments the data scientist really nicely if used properly. But, you know, I think people sometimes misunderstand AutoML.
Yeah, it doesn't replace a data scientist, right? Because part of the point of the exploratory process is to say, what do I not have here? What information do I need to get which would augment this stuff? And AutoML like can't do that because it doesn't know what it doesn't, you know, what doesn't exist yet, right?
But what about like, is it just AutoML or is it like, okay, like this is one, let me give you an example. I feel like software engineer, okay, I feel like, okay, I'm gonna give a very specific example. I feel like Kubeflow was a software engineer saying, or I know that Kubeflow was a software engineering saying, hey, like Kubernetes has one for software. We should just use ML with that. And so, but I don't know if that was like the best fit.
Nope. What was XML? XML was, hey, look, HTML has one for like web pages. So let's use something HTML-like to do all data interchange formats forever. Like, you know what I mean? It's the same kind of like I agree with you. Kubeflow is like not the right solution because it's made from the same sort of bad, like reasoning by analogy or sort of, you know, reasoning by hype cycle or whatever kind of nonsense, right? I guess like I'm kind of more, I feel like I'm aligned with Shrey here, like her more optimistic perspective, which is that like, I think Kubeflow was a first attempt and it was bad. AutoML is another attempt and it is bad. And we will keep working though. We're not done yet. Like we don't have to stop. We can keep going. We can keep at this until finally someone gets it right. And I guess I am optimistic that someone will.
Here's one thing I'm super intrigued about. There isn't like people talk about the need for opinionated workflows in data science and machine learning. I have yet to see an actual opinionated one. No, I'm legitimately serious. Like,
what about Kubeflow? It's like you should use Kubernetes. That's an opinion.
Okay, sorry, an actual opinionated one based on principles that are not tied to the hype cycle, as you say.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I see. That's a higher bar to clear. I like that.
I should also say, like, I have a lot of friends in the Kubeflow community. So if you don't want to throw shade on anybody, but that is just like a good example of.
I think it is a good example. I think it is. But I mean, I like that we're trying. We're not always going to succeed, and like that's okay. But we do have to keep trying. We don't have it yet. We need to keep at it, I think.
So okay, like, why do you think that? We have been like sort of bamboozled into thinking that the traditional software engineering workflow is good for ML. Like, okay, outside this panel, I feel like everywhere I go, there's somebody always on a soapbox. And when I say everywhere I go, I mean at every company that I visit or I'm a part of, there's someone on a soapbox that is screaming very, very loudly that, hey, you idiots. Like use software engineering workflows. If you're just a good software engineer. In fact, you know, we're just gonna like throw software engineers on this. We're just gonna hire software engineers and they're just gonna learn ML. That's how strongly like this view is like projected. But like why? So like how, like, is it because we are as a profession, maybe we are like insecure about something, or we're afraid, or why do we let this like get to us? Like,
I want to riff on that for a question for Shreya, I think, which is, Shreya, like in the paper, the panelists you interviewed, the people you interviewed, the participants, everyone is either an ML engineer or a ML engineering manager. And I'm curious, like, what were they really? Were they software engineers who like Hamel saying, who picked up some ML, or were they like ML people who learned a lot of software? Like who were these people?
Both. Almost 50-50 split. And the MLE managers, I will say, like, they were MLEs before they were MLE manager. Like, they were like an MLE last year. So a lot of the anecdotes were about like them being on call sort of is what we really focused on. But there was a nice mix of people from different like data science or software engineering backgrounds. And I think when you're in that space where you have to do the model training and you be on call, you develop the nuanced perspectives, and you develop like, you can't, none of them are preaching the software engineering soapbox story, because
interesting.
They know, I think they do this on a day-to-day, and they realize that you cannot just like throw buzzwords at a problem and it solves it.
So that's super interesting. I was deeply curious if like in your data, like, there was like, do these people's like, despite their different backgrounds, they converge to the same set of opinions, which is really interesting.
Well,
right?
different opinions, but same, different opinions on different things, right? Like Jupyter notebooks or whatnot.
So I want to go into that. So like, do the software engineers who do model training, do they like Jupyter notebooks or not? I mean, again, like,
I don't think we sliced by that, so I can't.
Can you do it real quick? Can you just like do it? Just, hey, I got a quick question. Can you just the
software takes 5 minutes to load on my M1 Mac, the like social sciences software.
We need to apply software engineering principles to social sciences.
Oh God. Okay, the one really strong quotes that I don't like I don't like Jupyter Notebook quotes were this came in the context of I had to reproduce somebody else's Jupyter Notebook, and it was the worst experience of my life, and I had to do this 3 times, and I hate Jupyter Notebooks. All of the quotes were kind of from a story like that.
100% makes sense. Yes, totally.
I care so much now that like I'm so happy my team is never using Jupyter Notebooks again. Like things like that. I think most of them were software engineers, but honestly, I don't even know, right? Because everyone is training models in some fashion. Everyone is deploying models in some fashion. So it's like, I don't think people really identify at this point. When you're like really years deep into ML engineer, you cannot really identify with one or the other. If you're,
I mean, if you do, you shouldn't be in ML engineering anymore, right?
Yeah, you should go to the other things. So there's
Yeah, I'm always puzzled by that reaction to notebooks, like using it as a scapegoat of like a really bad process, which I don't really, if someone can't reproduce someone else's notebook, well, it's like, well, why didn't that person restart and run all their notebook or do something like sane?
No, I think it's a thing here, right? Which is that like, and this is a thing, and this does happen, and it's happened to me, which is like, I'm, data scientist, like, or whatever, throws some like garbage notebook over the wall to me. And it's like, here you go, productionize this. I'm like, I don't know if I can curse in this thing, but like, did you just tell me to go F myself? Basically, is that what you just said? Like, that's how it feels to me when someone does that. So
totally. Yeah.
Right. That's like, so I mean, is it a garbage process? Yes. But it's like the tangible manifestation of the garbage process is the notebook. And that's what people hate, because you can't hate the person, but you can definitely hate the notebook. Yeah.
I think it's also interesting. Like, I can't say I hate notebooks because I use notebooks. Like, if I need to do analysis, if I need to do something really quick and prototype something, I'm going to use a notebook.
Sure.
I put notebooks on GitHub repos all the time, send them to people, because it's like, I like have a Hex account, and, there's like 50 people from UC Berkeley that have been preached the gospel by me and my collaborators.
Yeah.
But it's there, like you want, it's good for a certain kind of work. I think the problem is when you try to move it to other kind of work.
I mean, when I read that quote, about the Jupyter notebook, I mean, maybe I should just read it real quick.
Please.
Let me find it. Okay, so it says, there were all sorts of manual issues. Someone would, run something with the wrong sort of inputs from the notebook, and I'm debugging for like a day and a half. Then I'd figure out this was all garbage. 8 months ago, we realized this is not working, and we needed to put the engineering effort to create non-notebook pipelines. And then somewhere else it says like, there's some people don't even allow notebooks. So like when I read that there's like organizations that don't allow notebooks, that seems very hostile. That seems like the software engineers have completely taken over and like I don't even understand how you could like iterate
those
properly
places
in that
still have
environment.
notebooks, right? It's like, it's, those places, it's not like they don't really have, they totally still have notebooks. It's just not like, you're not advertising the fact that you have notebooks. Like a notebook's not an acceptable way to like write a spec, for instance, but it is, but of course they still exist. Of course they do.
Like you can't commit a notebook as part of a PR at a lot of organizations. Like, yeah, you can put it on your computer and they have like some reserved instances maybe for notebooks, but it's not like your job, you're not evaluated on your PRs. You can't have notebooks in there. I think that's like what people say when we don't have notebooks at our organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that really burns me, by the way, but we don't have to go into that.
I'm super okay with it and it makes me happy. So sorry, I'm like, yeah, notebooks are mean. Hex is great, but notebooks are mean. So anyway, can we talk about YAML a little bit?
Yeah.
Let's talk about YAML. I'm curious about, like, I think, it was interesting how much of like, I think I've heard it joked for a while that like ML engineering is really like YAML engineering, right? Yeah. You code in YAML. And I was happy to see that. Like people dunk on YAML a lot, I think. And yet it was cool to see so many people like, yeah, no, we pretty much just do everything in YAML, more or less. Like it's all like, anyway, the pipeline work is done and stuff. And like YAML is our primary development environment, which I just kind of loved. Yeah.
I was surprised to see so much love for YAML because there's few things in this world I hate more than like YAML all the time. I find it very difficult. Like, first of all, like when I'm doing this YAML development, like I always have trouble like figuring out what the spec is. It's like, look at some documentation. Does this thing go under this key? What are the allowed values here?
Yeah.
Like for whatever reason, I don't feel like I have a good development environment, or there doesn't exist one where it like tells you what all the possibilities are for the YAML you're writing. I don't know why that doesn't exist. Like someone should make that. But and then like it's like very. It's also associated a lot of times with like very long iteration cycles. Like change some YAML, wait 10 minutes to see what happens, and then like I have no idea what is like if it's something errors. Like I don't know, is it the YAML? Maybe, like I don't know.
So Shreya, what makes for a successful YAML workflow? Like what these people who use YAML and that makes them happy. What about it makes them happy? What do they like about it? How does it work?
The positive anecdotes came from, we make all changes in YAML, so the space of possible bugs is much smaller. Like if you can only make 5-character change, there's not so much that you can do, right? Like a lot of those same people said like beforehand, people will like fork the repo and then run something. You don't like when you're maintaining that much of a diff, right? Like it's easy for discrepancies to come up, right? It's not synced with the main branch, like all sorts of stuff. So I think that's where like the love for not particularly YAML and say, but I think one person said YAML, but like the idea of constraining your changes, making them really small. At least that's what we said in the paper. That was really nice. Also, another nice side effect was now you can trust your collaborators' work a lot more because they also made small changes.
Yeah.
So I think it's like very team-based kind of attitude there. I don't know if anyone said they loved YAML per se, but
they love that workflow, which is very software engineering-y, if I may say so myself. Like that sounds like a good in any language, a good PR is a tiny PR.
Tiny PR. And the other thing is like a lot of these people also talked about paranoia when debugging and verifying, or not just debugging, but verifying other like new PRs or verifying new experiments. Like there's a paranoia, like can we make the code change as small as possible? Can we make the data diffs super transparent? Like then I can exhaustively enumerate through all the possible bugs that I have in my mind. I think that's kind of where people are trying to get with these config layers.
I love that. I guess I also kind of was wondering, like, Shreya, we talk about like there's sort of like platform ML engineering, and then there's like specific task level ML engineering. And what I read from that paper with sort of the config driven stuff was like people creating kind of their own little domain specific platforms for their area, basically. And I was like, did that speak to you? Is that right?
Totally. I think this doesn't scale though whenever you're like at a Google size or Facebook size, because every task is like a different org. So then you have like a platform, or not every task is different, but like Google, organizations like Google will have multiple orgs within it, right? And they will all have their own different platforms.
Yes.
So like, what is the level of granularity, I guess,
I guess for me, it speaks to the fact that like being a task or like domain oriented ML person is a terrible job, and it's deeply unfun. And like building platforms though, super fun. Like love building platforms, right? And so it's kind of like it's this human.
So like that's your opinion. Other people will say I would much rather train models, and then they would
I know, it's a panel, Shrey. I'm trying to like inflict my opinions on you. That's anyway. Okay. Yeah. All right. You caught me. Fair. All right. Granted.
I think that brings us to the next question is like, so like the paper focuses a lot around like broken processes, nothing to do with like tools or anything, like processes that are like not correct. And just in terms of like standardizing things, communicating properly, documenting things. So it does bring up the question, like, it seems like we like really focus on tools a lot with MLOps, almost to the extent where it feels like we are trying to fix broken processes with tools.
Yes.
And also to Josh's point earlier, so Josh mentioned that, okay, for him, it's more fun a lot of times to build platforms than train models. I think there's also like some incentive. There's a lot of incentives, like at least I'll talk about some incentive like inside tech companies. I feel like the engineering class is the highest class. And like data science, machine learning sometimes is like a service function. And like if you can, the way you can, as a machine learning person, like kind of get into the engineering class is to create tools, which has like a lot, it pulls you in into that, like the incentives, like they're strongly pull you there. And then, but then also like, I feel like we focus a lot on tools, and a lot of people gravitate towards making tools, and there's this tool explosion. So just want to have y'all react to that a bit.
You want me to give my honest thought? Like,
yes. 100%.
Yeah, like market incentives. It's much more lucrative for somebody to go start a company on a platform than to go do ML engineering at a company. Like, that's what happens. That's how you get tool explosion. So
much easier to get promoted at the Googles and Facebooks of the world to develop a tool that is used by lots of people, gets lots and lots of leverage, without a doubt. And it's a perverse incentive, and it drives people way, way off into the deep end of complexity for, I don't know, I called it like, in tweets, I've referred to this as like technical pyrotechnics or whatever. Like it's like you're doing things that are absurdly complicated for honestly no reason. Just like, you're doing it for a reason. You're doing it to get promoted. You're doing it for money, but it inflicts like a terrible cost. Like, why does, Facebook and Google have to have like 100,000 people working there? It's because of all this stupid shit they've built, basically. Anyway, like kind of without a doubt, without a question. I would say, not for nothing, it is not always the case that engineers are the end all be all at any company. It just happens to be true at a lot of tech companies. Slack by far, design was by far the highest status profession at Slack. Apple, I don't really know what it is at Apple, to be honest with you. I'm kind of curious, but anyway.
By design. That is the design.
Is the design there as well?
No. By design, we're not supposed to know. Sorry. Like. Oh,
why was design?
No, by design, we're not supposed to know.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. It's a good point. So I guess it's correct that I don't know what it is at Apple, but that's okay. Anyway, so it's not. It is that way at a lot of companies, but it's not universally true. But certainly, anyway. No.
So are y'all going to create tools companies?
Damn it. I'm trying not to. I really am doing my best. I'm really trying really hard.
What the market? Look at the market right now.
Oh God! Wait, what is it? Huh?
You could raise million tomorrow if you started a company, probably.
I've actually been in conversations with the VCs. They ask me like what I'm working on, and I like throw off like a few sentences, and they're like, "Sounds great." Four at 20, let's do it. I'm like, what the hell's the matter with you people? Anyway, I'm really trying not to. I'm trying not to become a venture capitalist. I'm trying not to start yet another data tools company. I'm doing my best. I really am.
Yeah, it's another data tool.
Exactly. Yet another data tools company. It's what if I start one, that's what I'll call it. How about that?
Yeah, that's great.
Exactly. Like,
I'll invest.
I appreciate that, I think. Anyway, Shreya, but what about you? What company are you starting that I can invest in?
No, I haven't thought, like, I don't have a great idea right now that I think is like actually a long-term. If I do, down to start, but I think it's hard. You have to find something that's like a good idea that actually will help the situation, that will last and is independent of the hype cycle. I think that's like an incredibly hard thing to do. I
completely agree. Completely. Totally. But so to that end, though, I want to ask about something that I am passionate about, which you mentioned in your paper, which is the industry classroom mismatch, which I absolutely loved and very much like spoke to me based on my experiences and stuff like that, of like what we are teaching kids about machine learning in school is not remotely reflective of reality, and like how jarring that experience is for people to come out. And so I was curious if you have thoughts, like what should we be doing about this? What is the way forward here?
My thoughts have actually flipped a little bit since I wrote that paper. When I wrote that paper, I thought like, oh my God, the classes are not teaching enough airflow and not enough DBT. And we should be empowering people with like real world technologies and tools. And to that extent, right, a lot of colleges have started sub-programs like data science within CS or within broader computing, like data science or like information sciences, or I don't know, like various names. And so I'll give you an anecdote. I'm TAing this version of databases, but for the data science major, or like a different version of databases, where the idea is we want to be more practical, more applied in the real world. And I was like, oh man, it's gonna be 10 weeks of SQL, and they're gonna come out of it knowing how to do every join and every window, because no one teaches SQL in school, right? And I was very surprised to find out that it is more important to actually teach them the internals of SQL and query optimization and whatnot. And the reason is because when you go out in the industry, you can learn the syntax, but you will come across a bug. And if you can't get the answer from Stack Overflow, you need to figure out how to reason about it.
Yes.
And when you don't know things under the hood, like if you don't know how indexes work, or even what the concept of an index is, if you don't know, like there is a thing called query optimization. Like if I write the queries two different ways, it will be pushed down to the same thing, right? Like these kinds of things are not given to you in Stack Overflow answers, but you are going to look up when you're like, man, my boss is complaining about my AWS bill. I need to make this Spark job run faster. Like, you don't even know how to reason about that if you don't know some sort of internal. So for that reason, I feel like it is totally okay to sacrifice like some tools, some syntax for kind of deeper level understanding. And I know a lot of people will disagree with that. Now I think more academic in a way. So,
Hamel, what do you think? What was your opinion on this?
Yeah, my main question is it different than any other profession? Like, I feel like it's almost like all professions say that to some degree. Like, hey, you're not teaching the right things in school, you know? You know, that's whatever it might be. So I was just curious, is it like acute for ML in some way, or is it different?
So I think ML is also different from data. I think the pace at which ML is moving is unbelievable. Like tomorrow, some new invention will come out, and 2 hours later, you'll see like a company that's literally at that speed. I think ML is also different in that there's like a few key players in machine learning that kind of dictate the education around machine learning. And that makes it really hard. Like I will say, like some Stanford professors are very.
I was like, am I one of these people, Shreya? Is it me?
No. Like academics, I guess. Like when we're talking about industry classroom, that's fine. There's a few classroom people in machine learning who like almost 100% dictate what people are learning.
Or like fundamental textbooks and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And maybe that's not different for different fields. Like other sciences fields are also probably monopolized by individual professors. But it's really weird in machine learning when it's like so big, moving so fast. Like the whole data-centric AI thing really got me a bit upset because like, okay, so the model-centric AI, right? The philosophy of like, let's iterate on the model by hook or by crook. We're going to do something until we eke out some performance on the validation set. They have just purported that to data. I will take a fixed data set. By hook or by crook, I will add some examples, remove some examples, clean some to get a small boost on the validation set.
Oh, fuck. God, you're right. That's exactly what they did. Damn it.
Yeah, I never realized that. That was like a brilliant marketing.
Oh my God.
And it's like, no, that like I had a problem with the by hook or by crook philosophy.
Exactly.
I don't care about the like model or the data. We want something that gives large gain over long period of time, and nobody has framed ML education in that way.
Damn.
So
that's some real talk right there. God, like, wow.
Yeah.
You're totally right. That's messed up. Okay.
That is right. It's hard to argue with that. I mean, it's like, maybe it's kind of, is it related to the tools thing? Like this narrative is like in service of some tools or some companies.
Narrative in service. I think it's back to the promotions thing, but for academia, promotions is getting published. And like, this is how you get published. And so it's like, we haven't changed the incentive of academia. So they've relabeled it or whatever, but they're basically just doing exactly the same thing they were doing before in the model-centric world because we haven't changed the incentives, right? So, shit, man, okay. Damn.
Yeah, like it's like get rid of the concept of this like holdout validation set. Like the number of these like competitions in like NeurIPS or whatever, like the data-centric competitions. I mean, it's like nice that people are thinking about data. I'll give them that. But like just the competition should not be take ImageNet and like change whatever examples so that you win the competition. Like
exactly. Horrible. Just horrible.
It's very data centric though. So I don't know. I always have these mixed feelings though. It's like, oh, like it's good that you're saying the word data, but like, oh no, like everything else about it. So
Hamel, I want to give you the last question. I do, because you did all the work to make this happen, so I appreciate it. What
this is very interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And also, I can't think of a question to top the answer. So like, shit.
Yeah. So okay, like one question I want to ask is like, okay, you highlighted data leakage, which I thought is amazing. Yeah. Because I'm gonna like from my anecdotal experience, you know, as I would say, 75% of all pre-existing machine learning pipelines I encounter in the wild have data leakage.
Yes.
My question is like, it stems from like this situation where models are trained on like analytics data. Like there's some, you know, table out there and like someone decides to grab that. They're like, oh, that's low hanging fruit. This data is already like curated and this thing, like whatever, we can trust it, use for as a report. But, you know, it's not like backfilled in a way that like really pays attention to like time. And it's like, there's some data leakage there. So like, do you think, is that the problem? Like from my anecdote, is that like a big part of the problem? Are there other problems? Is there like a, you know, is the solution to like inject some kind of constraints into analytics and data pipelines, or is this trend like we're like experiencing now to make like separate feature stores like a good thing?
I wrote this in the dev prod mismatch because like when you get rid of the assumptions gap, you won't have this problem. Like you should be pulling from prod data and then do your transforms on it. Then you will not have this leakage in a way. And when I say pulling from prod data, like I think some databases companies are talking about this, but time travel, or at least talking about it more recently. But I should take my prod snapshot and be able to travel back in time to 3 months ago and then pull data from that and start training. Then I don't get the assumptions gap, right?
So like when you say prod data, I'm imagining a situation like where you still need to like join a bunch of things and aggregate things and do all this stuff. And like the skeptic in me is like, no one's gonna do that. Like they just want to go to the thing that's there.
I agree. I think the interfaces are both the interfaces are bad and the latency is unacceptable, right? Like if there's already pre-materialized data, like these analytics tables, I would much rather read from that than like even call an Airflow DAG or run an Airflow DAG that will take 8 hours to go from like last snapshot of data to some version of features, right?
It's back to like velocity validation again.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. This is always sort of foreign to me that I came from like the school of log and wait. Y'all know log and wait?
No.
Log and wait. So log and wait is like people have written about this a little bit. I'm sorry, I'm out of coffee. Log and wait was what we did at Slack and what we did at Google, where we just like had logs that were our training data. So let's just try some new features. Let's just like add them to the logs and like let the logs run for a while, and then eventually we'll have training data. And I always felt like that was great because it wasn't like we were just sitting around with nothing to do. We had like 800 other things to do, and so you could just like, you know, kind of pipeline things. I guess roughly is like log your data, wait a couple of weeks, then you had lots of data, and you could like train on it and stuff like that. And so that was like a great solution as far as I'm concerned, but I understand that it doesn't make everyone happy.
It doesn't make people happy, and it's high latency, especially for a lot of these companies where they've like not found good product market fit. Like you'll have these Series C companies that don't have product market fit, and they're like velocity is like utmost importance, right? To get
for sure
something.
That's right.
I don't think they're willing to wait weeks.
Yeah. I have never worked at unsuccessful companies, so I don't know what that's like. But I can imagine that as a problem for people. I get that. Yeah. Cool. I would say I'll steal the last question. We have a little more time, which was
please do.
Shreya, I was curious, and I think it's especially appropriate for a panel to talk about this. The seeking to explain the unknown, like retrofitting explanations onto things, right? What is a panel if it is not 3 people looking to retrofit explanations onto some things? But like
we love doing that.
We do.
Annotated. We love. I don't know what exactly you said, Hamel, but it was like we love doing this or something.
We can't help ourselves. We are humans. We love telling stories. It's great.
Yeah. I mean, like when I read the section in the paper, retrofitting explanation, I was like, okay, this is like definitely like human nature. But then also I wonder, like, because it happens in ML research too.
Oh yeah.
So is it just bleeding from there to here into applied ML?
Interesting.
Maybe. Yeah. I think also like putting myself in the data science shoes, like when you retrofit, then you can create new heuristics for yourself for future projects. Like this worked because X. And so now I'm going to find similar projects in the future because it's the same. So maybe there's like there's a reason that we want to retrofit. That's like not just our human nature.
Yeah. I think I very much felt that way running like ML models and experiments at Google and stuff. It was like I this compulsive need to build a mental model of what the system was doing.
Exactly.
Could not help myself, broadly speaking.
It makes you look smart for sure in conversation, especially with non-ML people. They're like, oh, that person knows that, and they know why everything is happening.
But I think it's important though to call out is like what I loved about doing like, you know, A/B testing and experiment-driven research in production, especially with like real money on the line, was that you would come up with experiments that would disprove your hypotheses. And
I love that.
You're actually wrong about this, and like your model was incorrect. And that was like that's always a revelation and stuff. And it's that's sort of what I loved about this stuff was that like adherence to ground truth and reality, especially when money is involved, just makes things very real and very low, you know, religious, whatever, apocryphal beliefs, like, you know, just like sort of nonsense, I guess, basically. And I don't know. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think there's enough A/B testing in machine learning. Like people know that they should be doing it more, but it's not like the tools aren't really there. It's not really discussed that much.
So many people have been saying they want to start these like A/B testing companies, but you need to like sell to people who have enough predictions that they're making in order to A/B test appropriately, right? Like some companies will have like only 5 customers, and then at that point it's like, how do you like appropriately A/B test? I don't even think that's possible.
It's not.
Yeah.
I don't know. You could maybe do something with interleaving a little bit, or like contextual bands. But I mean, if you're talking about like 5 people or 5 customers, like the A/B test is, are the customers happy or not? Like that's, that's the boundary. Really.
Yeah.
No, that's true. It's a good point. It's a good point. So we're a little over time.
That's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah,
right?
I think we're a little bit over time.
Okay. Andrew is not shutting us down yet or anything. So I think we can we keep talking? Is that?
I have no idea.
Okay, I'm not sure. Yeah,
Andrew, she said we can. Yeah.
Go nuts. Okay.
I don't know how long to keep talking, but
I have to leave in 10 minutes, so that's my hard stop.
We have a hard stop. I'm probably supposed to be in a meeting right now, but I rarely show up for meetings anymore. Sure, it's fine.
That's my dream. People are like, oh, like, do you want to go to academia or start a company or whatever? And I'm like, I want the job where I don't have to go to meetings. Right now, my job is amazing. I don't have to go to meetings unless they're useful. So
braggy, Shreya, braggy, but fair.
It's being a junior.
I really hate meetings too. Yeah.
And both of you have solved that by academia on one hand and not having a job on the other. So I applaud you.
Yeah.
I am clearly the dumbest person in this panel, without a doubt. I just try, like, let me ask a follow up. Like, this was just, I mean, the paper was just awesome. Like, I just love it so much. How? And I'm sorry, like, to be like that guy, but like, so how are you going to top it, Shreya? What do you have next? What have you done for me lately? What's the next paper?
Okay, well, there's one paper coming out on automatic data validation. I'm submitting that next month.
That's exciting.
We talk about the problem of like false positives when it comes to data validation, like when you alert on missing data, broken columns, data drift, all of these things.
Can I have a copy of that paper right now? Can I have it early? Because I got to teach this class. I'll
follow up with you. I'll send you the draft.
I would love to read this. So please, yes, thank you. Yes.
So we benchmark a bunch of like existing methods, both from databases and like canonical, like your KS test and 2-sample testing and stuff. I have some nice anecdotes on why nobody should be using KS test for monitoring ML models. Like all of these things I think just needed to be in a paper. So that's like, I'm wrapping that up. We have, spoiler alert, our own method that does really well.
That sounds like it's going to be the start of a company, Shreya. I'm not going to lie.
No. I don't know.
It's going to sort of blow a bunch of MLOps monitoring tools out of the water.
This seems like there's a lot of tension towards creating a company for.
Yeah, it's very suspicious, Shreya. Suspicious.
No, I don't want to create a monitoring only company.
Okay.
It's just, at least my advisors and Berkeley database group. Like if you don't like own the data, it's really hard to do anything useful. So I don't know about like company's sake, but so that paper is coming out, and then also thinking a lot about kind of detecting, diagnosing performance drops in production. How do we do this when there are no labels? So one of the undergrads I'm working with we have a paper on that coming probably next semester. And then some other stuff around like diagnosing ML models. At least in databases, we talk a lot about provenance in general, like can we identify the source of things? Maybe this will help us for debugging. Maybe this will help us for data set distillation, throwing away unnecessary data, etc. When ML models come into the picture, right, everything is really hard because now somehow every piece of data is used in an ML model, but you don't really know how. So we're working on a paper that's like, given some single test point, can you identify the top training examples? Can you do this cheaply in one pass?
Oh, that's awesome, Shreya. That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really exciting.
A lot of fun stuff coming out. I'm really excited.
That's fantastic.
That is exciting. And Josh, what kind of course are you teaching? You said you might use it in a course.
So I teach a class on data engineering for machine learning, which is like sort of how I think about like building, machine learning systems and stuff, like from a very data centric perspective.
Yes.
I'm not trying to publish any papers or improve anything. I'm just trying to like help people build like useful models in reality, So like data, and we have a whole section, basically one of the sessions we do is really focused entirely on like the sort of plethora of data quality and validation tools there, and like how do we link information we find during training from the data warehouse to the production system where we're doing inference. Because I guess like to my extent, in my experience, for what it's worth, like most of the truly catastrophic ML errors I've encountered has been like when the data changed dramatically instantaneously. You know what I mean?
Read the intro of our automatic data val paper. I'm going to send it to you. I would love your feedback.
I cannot wait. I'm so excited. So thank you so much for that. That's fantastic. But anyway, that's awesome. Would you consider doing another like interview study like this? Is it like, I mean, given that the social sciences software takes 5 minutes to load on an M1.
It's funny. The way that we got into this was, before grad school, I was like, oh, maybe should I start like building my own tool or something? Like, let me do some customer user research or something. I talked to a bunch of people, and then I was like, oh, this was a mistake because there's way too much out there. I don't have good mental models, like what's going on in the world, like who to build for. ML is a long tail of like applications, debugging patterns, organizational patterns, everything right now. So it's really hard to kind of focus on where the tail you want. Then when I started the PhD, a professor emailed our lab asking like, hey, can you contribute to this MLOps repository with like some best practices? And we're like, okay. And we start writing things, and we're like, there's absolutely nothing to back anything up. And we're like academics preaching, this feels terrible. Let's try to build something that can back things up so we can like go see this paper. We did this. And then Joe and Aditya were like, yeah, you can do an interview study, but let me warn you that it'll take up like hundreds and hundreds of hours. And I was like, there's no way it could take hundreds and hundreds of hours. Companies do interview studies all the time, and it's like super fun. I was so wrong. A number of times we iterated on the questions. You have to be like kind of as unbiased as possible in these interview questions. All the coding, there's hundreds of hours that are just in the coding of the transcripts. Like, I have utmost respect for HCI researchers.
Yes,
I don't know. Every single paper that they do is just like, oh my God, like it's so much work. It's so much work.
So never again. Like, that's it. You're done.
The next time I do an interview study paper will be like if I am considering pivoting to different area of work. It was great in that I learned a ton, but I will not be doing them willy-nilly.
Gotcha. It's very thoughtful. Well, I mean, again, I think I don't know, speaking for Hamel, and I think for a lot of us in the industry, like, we just thank you so much. Like, we're incredibly grateful. It's beautiful work. It means so much to so many people. So like, thank you so much for it. Thank you.
I've been able to use the paper like quite a bit in conversations.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Sometimes throw it in someone's face when they try to shove software engineering down my throat.
It's literally me. I was the person he's talking about.
No, thank you. That's super kind. It wasn't just me. It was Rolando, Joe, and Aditya. Super, like everybody was involved. I'm very lucky to have an advisor, Aditya, who's like very like good at mentoring and very good at writing. I'm learning a lot from this. I love being a PhD student for that reason. Like, you just like develop a breadth of skills. So
awesome.
Definitely shout out to them too.
Absolutely. We will let you go. Thank you so much, Ray. I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks a lot.